Furina is finally here, who seems to be a very strong support character in Genshin. She's an amazing character that's very flexible and can be used in a lot of teams. I will be covering all the teams I could find with a lot of characters and their substitutes. There are a lot of teams covered in this video. I mean seriously, I had to cover almost every single DPS in Genshin. So if you must, then please use the chapters below. So with that, let's begin. Before we move on to the teams, I want to cover the healers because a lot of these teams are dependent on your healers. Every Furina team will have a healer in some form and the amount of heals you get must be good. So the team that you decide to use will be dependent on your healer. First, I'll list the strong healers and then the weak healers. I'll just give a general idea on each healer now, and I will during the team section explain why some are strong in that team. So first of all, there's Jean, who seems to be a really strong healer with access to the Wriothesley Inventor set and is able to provide team-wide heals, which is a very important thing when you are using Furina. Similar to Jean, you can also use Sayu if you don't have her. Jean suddenly honestly is now very strong, and if you search up teams now, almost everybody is using Jean with Furina. Unfortunately, I don't have Jean, but of course you have alternate characters that you can use instead of Jean, such as Sayu, who also has access to Wriothesley Inventor, but there are other supports as well that you can use. Baizhu is similar in a way and provides healing for the whole team and can be used as a Dendro driver or just a Dendro applicator in Dendro teams. Yao Yao can also be used in this way and is a really good healer for your whole team. Then characters like Charlotte or Mika are really good as well for team-wide healing. But Charlotte has a very high ER requirement, so make sure you have enough ER on her. I will mention some teams where, there's a lot of ER required. It says that you need to make sure you have enough ER, but she will be good in most teams. I never thought I'd talk about Qiqi in a teams video, but Qiqi is also a really good healer, but I wouldn't recommend building her, just for Furina. But if you already have Qiqi built for whatever reason, you can use her as a healer. And you also have Barbara, who is good at healing, but again, like Qiqi, that's all she does. There's also Kokomi, and there's Noelle, both of them which are amazing healers. Noelle, you probably didn't know, can also heal you very well. But the thing is, for both Noelle and Kokomi, you have to be on field to provide healing. Kokomi does provide healing, with her skill, but for Noelle, you must be on field to provide healing. There are also other options such as, Kuki or Bennet or Diona. They provide some healing, but it says that they're centered more for single target healing where you're switching characters a lot. There might be some teams where you don't have any other options, you don't have healers, then you can use Bennet or Kuki, but you just need to make sure that you switch around more. Bennet is pretty good because even though he is centered around healing the main character, he has a lot of heals. So if you switch a lot, you can potentially get your whole team healed up. There are also pseudo healers that aren't really healers but can provide some healing, like Mona or Nahida, who can run Prototype Amber and can provide some healing, but it's not enough. Same with Goruo or even Dori, both of which require constellations, so I would recommend still running another healer with them. Healers are really important. I know I said that in the beginning, but you must know that they are very important because Furina can really weaken your team by taking away that HP. Trust me, I was doing a lot of Abyss runs and a lot of them, especially in this Abyss where there are enemies like the Sea Horse, they do a lot of damage, So if you don't have shields, then that'll be really bad for you. And because Furina needs a healer, you're gonna be stuck with, the 4th slot. You have to decide if you want to have someone who has a shield or someone who can, you want more damage. So I'm going to recommend a lot of teams that are not going to have shields, but they deal a lot of damage. So you need to make sure that you're comfortable with that team. You just need to make sure you have good healers. If you don't have good healers, then it's honestly not worth running that team. Now that we're done with that, let's begin with our teams, starting with Vaporize. The general team format will be of course Furina, player unit, then a healer, and finally a flex, depending on the player main DPS to use. So there's Yoimiya, Hu Tao, and Diluc that I want to cover. There's also a team with jungling and even Klee. So when you're using Yoimiya as your main DPS, the teams would either have only one Hydro character, which will be Furina, or it can have two because Furina is able to keep up with the pyro application for Yoimiya. So if you want to use one Hydro character, the teams would be like this. So you'll need a healer after Furina and Yoimiya, which can be Mika or Charlotte. Then your 4th slot can be Bennet or anything that works with her. So like Yunjin, Kazuha, or Zhongli. Zhongli being very good because it makes it a lot easier to use Yoimiya with that shield. When your healer is Jean or even Sayu instead of using Charlotte or Mika. You don't want to use Bennet as your fourth character, as you will be swirling the pyro, which means you won't get vapes, and Furina won't be able to keep up anymore. But if you really want to use them in a team like that, you can. It's just that you won't get vapes now from Yoimiya, because now you have swirled the pyro, so which means that now you're gonna get more pyro damage. You can even run Bennet as your sole healer and then run Zhongli as your fourth character. Though the heals won't be amazing because again Bennet is a single target healer, but the damage bonus should be good enough. Many of the teams you make with Yoimiya though won't be having a shield unless you use Zhongli, so be careful about that. You know, using Yoimiya like that might be really difficult, and she will be even more squishier because of Furina. Other than that, it should be good. Now, if you're running 2 Hydra characters with Yoimiya, you will have Yoimiya, Furina, and then you can use either Sincho or Yolan, and the fourth character to be a healer. So Jean, Charlotte, Miku, Sayu, even Baizhu and Yao Yao can work. Though it'll make some seeds, it'll still work. Because with Furina, you really need heals, or it gets very hard to play the team. Now, if you're to use Hu Tao or Diluc, both pretty similar in terms of their teams, their general team would be Hu Tao or Diluc, then Furina, then a Hydra character, and then a healer. There's a lot of options for the healer, with, you know, Jean being really good. Other healers will also work that I mentioned, but how powerful they are really depends on the extra bonuses they can provide. So you can also use Kokomi, Charlotte, Baizhu, and then the others. You can also just ditch the extra Hydra character and instead run Kazuha to swirl the Hydra and get enough Hydra application through that, which is also something you can do. You can also use Klee, where either she is doing the vapes or Furina is. So you can just use a similar double Hydra setup for Klee with a healer similar to Hu Tao and Yoimiya, or you can use Klee, Furina, Bennet, and Kazuha, which is a reverse vape team where you just need a lot of Hydra application, similar to which you can also use Furina, Zhangling, and Bennet and Jean, or another animal character, though Bennet only healer in that team who only supports heals for one character that's on field. You could also do something like Furina, then Sincho, then Bennet and Zhangling, or instead of Sincho, you could use Sucrose as well. But if you see in these teams, you really don't have anyone as your driver or like your main on-field DPS, so you can switch between these characters a lot to keep up the heals. Also, for example, if you don't have Jean and you're using a Hu Tao team like Hu Tao, Yolan, Furina, and Charlotte, then from my experience, what I noticed was that because of Furina making everyone so much more squishy and Hu Tao, you know, really taking away her own HP a lot more, and if you have like a C0 Hu Tao and you also do not have Charlotte that well built because it's been only a few days since the update came out, so in that case, which is right now my case, I was having a hard time, you know, beating some of the floors because I just kept getting hit and it was really bad. So what you can do is use Bennet. Now, I did say Bennet is not amazing because again, he only heals like one character, but this makes it a lot easier to use Hu Tao as your on-field DPS, and she won't die as much, right? If you just really want to use Hu Tao and Furina together, and even if you don't have Jean or, you know, Charlotte belt, then you can do something like that. Next up are free teams. They're generally my favorite teams in Genshin, and Furina works really well in them too. So the general format will be Furina, a cryo unit, a healer, and a flex. First, let's start with some Ayaka teams. So Furina, Ayaka, then you have to choose a healer. Now, usually you want to have another cryo character to get cryo resonance, and then the last character can be an animal character. In this case, if we decide to use a cryo healer, so Charlotte or Mika, you can also use Diona, but she will struggle a lot, so I'd recommend using another character or a second healer. Then our animal character can be any animal support that is more offensive, like Kazuha, Sucrose, Lynette, Venti being really good for Ganyu, or Jean if you decide to use Diona as your cryo character, or any other flex character that you usually use with Ayaka, like Bennet, Zhongli, or a Hydra character like Yolan, Sincho, Mona, Albedo, or any other flex character. If let's say you didn't want to use a cryo healer, then you have to pick a healer that doesn't interfere with the freeze and can provide enough heals. Jean seems to fit perfectly. You could also try to use Bennet, but again, it's not the team-wide heals and you're losing out on Veritas and Venner, but maybe the flex character, depending on who you choose, can help with some healing. And then after you have a healer picked, your flex character can now be a cryo unit like Shenhe or Rosaria or any of the other flex characters I mentioned. Each of them having their strengths and weaknesses, and depending on how your character has been built, you can decide to use your flex character as whoever, your cryo character as whoever, depending on whoever you have in your account. There's a lot of variations with Freeze team, which is why I really do like Freeze a lot. Next up is Wriothesley. Whatever I set for Ayaka is pretty much the same for Wriothesley. I think the only difference, I guess, is that if you want to use Bennet as a soul healer, he will be a bit worse because on Ayaka, even though she can be used as an on-field DPS with her charge stacks, her strongest point is her ult, which you can just use her ult and then switch off her. So you would be able to heal your other party members by switching out. But Wriothesley needs more time on field, which may hinder this. For Ganyu, the flex characters may change, but for the most part it's pretty simple as she just uses charge stacks now, so you have to make use of characters that can buff your charge stack. You can even make a team with Chongyun here if you really wanted to. So yeah, it's a very flexible team archetype, so depending on which characters you have available, you can probably make up a freeze team if you cannot do anything else. Now let's talk about the Hydro teams. Basically in these teams, you have more than 2 Hydro characters in a team, so you can go either mono Hydro with all 4 of them being Hydro, or with 3 Hydro characters and then the last slot being flex, like either Kazuha or another animal character, or Noelle can also work, Zhongli, things like that. So basically you will have Furina, then Yelan or Sincho, and then one of the Hydro characters can be a healer, so Kokomi. So in this case, you would have 3 Hydro characters with Yelan or Sincho, and then Kokomi, and then the last slot can be a flex. So you can either have Jean if you are not using Kokomi, because you could also just do Furina, Yelan, and Sincho with your last slot being Jean because you need heals, don't forget about that. Or you could also go with Noelle, because Noelle can also provide you with heals. And if you look at the team, you can see that nobody here can, really run on field. So you can use Noelle as your on-field character, which honestly works really well. But if you are using a Hydro healer, then your 4th character doesn't have to be a healer. So you can use someone like Zhongli or Venti or Kazuha. Basically a flex character you can use that works in a way that will make the Hydro element stronger, not just one of the characters that you're using. You can also use Barbara instead of Kokomi in this team, by the way. And then finally, if you want to just use all Hydro, you can. It will work too. You'll have Furina, Yelan, Sincho, and Kokomi, or Barbara instead of Kokomi. And then you can run Kokomi on field. You could probably also use Furina and Child or Ayato or Nouvillette together in their own respective teams, which I will cover later into the video. Just know that, you can also fit the other Hydro characters in a team like this. Now, I want to talk about Furina Taser teams. Honestly, they're doing a lot better now. After Dendro was just released, I kind of forgot about them, but it's good to see that they're still viable. So firstly, the general structure will be Furina, an Electro character, and 2 flexes. One of them, of course, has to be a healer. For the Electro character, any good Electro DPS or sub DPS will be good enough. So Official, Beidou, Yaimiko, Raiden Shogun, Lisa, they all will work. And after that, you could have another Electro character. So you could, for example, have Beidou and Official, or Raiden Shogun and Sarah, or Yaimiko and Official, mash them all together so the Electro characters can support each other and get enough ER for whichever character you want to use. Or you could just, go with only one Electro character and have an Anemo support or a flex of another elemental type. Your last slot has to be healer now. So any of the healers I mentioned above, usually you want at least one animal character, so try to get an animal character. If you have Jean, you can use her or Sayu and fill the healer role, or if you don't, then you can use the other animal supports like Sucrose or Hazel. But just make sure you have a healer that can fill the remaining roles. You cannot use just Kuki because Kuki won't be good enough to heal your whole team. I wouldn't recommend using Kuki alone as a healer and then having something like Furina, Kuki, an animal support like Sucrose, and then running a flex that is not a healer. I wouldn't recommend that because Kuki cannot heal your whole team alone. But what you could do is run a normal Electro character, and then I could use Kokomi if I'm not using Jean, and Kokomi can be my 3rd character with a team with only one Electro character. And Kokomi can be the on-field driver in a team like that because Kokomi can do some damage on field if you have her build like that. Or you could make up a Raiden Hypercarry team with Furina, Raiden, and then 2 buffers like Bennet and Jean or Sarah. or Sarah and Jean, which should be good as well. Now after you have your Electro and your healer sorted out, your last character can actually also be someone like Neuvillette to be on field. Now Neuvillette using prototype Amber is usually enough in a team for the Furina stacks. He won't be very good as a healer, but he will be able to get enough stacks for Furina because his HP increases and reduces a lot. Now it's time for the Dendro teams. Let's start with Hyperbloom first. For Hyperbloom, you need a Hydro character, a Dendro character, and an Electro character. For it, you need more than one Hydro character as Furina's Hydro application is not enough. So you would use Furina, then the second Hydro character can either be a healer or someone like Xingqiu or Yolan. If your Hydro character is a healer, like Barbara or Kokomi, then your Dendro character can be someone like Nahida instead of Baizhu or Yao Yao. But if you don't have a healer as your Hydro character, then you need to use them. For the Electro character, Kuki or Raiden Shogun are really good. Kuki alone is not able to provide enough healing, which is why we would need another healer in the team. You can also just decide not to use another Hydro character, in which case Furina won't be enough, her Hydro application won't be enough to effectively create a lot more seeds, but the team would turn into a Quickbloom team, so it will trigger a lot more spreads and activates depending on your characters. For example, if I, instead of having a Hydro character, I added another Dendro or Electro character, for example, Alhaitham or Tigneri, you would be able to basically turn the team into a Quickbloom team. Or you could add Sino or any other character that can be used here, such as Yaemiko or even Qiqi, any character that's, good for activates. Next up are Burgeon teams. For Burgeon, you need Furina, a Pyro character, a Dendro character, and finally the last slot can be a Flex, which can be either an Electro character, a Cryo character, or another Hydro character, which is what I would usually do if you want a pure Burgeon team, because Furina's application won't be enough, as I said before, but adding different elements if you're not using Hydro can create some really unique reactions which can make the team work. So basically, similar to Hyperbloom, you just need to make sure you have a good healer, and then you can use Flex characters depending on the elements required. Usually you use Toma for Burgeon. He just works really well with Burgeon, and then the Dendro character can be Nahida if you decide to use your last character as a healer, or if you don't, then you can use Baizhu or Yao Yao if you have them, and then the fourth character can be some other Flex character. Maybe you can use Fischl or Kokomi works really well, as you can use her as a driver there, or even you can use Xingqiu. There's quite a few options, you just need to make sure you're making enough cores. We're finally done with the overall elemental teams for Furina, but there are still teams that I didn't mention, but I want to talk about separately. These are mainly teams with Furina and another DPS because, well, she can almost work with every single DPS, so I have to cover them. As we were talking about Dendro teams, let's start with Nilou. Now, Nilou's Dendro cores won't be affected by Furina, so it may not make sense to add her there. But the thing is, Furina, she may not have the best Hydro application, but she can do decent Hydro application over a long time, and the way she applies the Hydro is also pretty good, which means that she is a good substitute for the Hydro character in Nilou teams. So you would have something like Furina, then Nilou, then you would want to run two Dendro characters for their resonance, and one of them has to be a healer, so either Yao Yao or Baizhu, with the last Dendro character being Nahida or the Dendro Traveler or Kali, the usual stuff for Nilou. Now the next one is an interesting one. I actually built Noelle just for Furina, and she works really well with her. So Noelle needs to be on field to heal your party members, and the healing, by the way, is pretty good. Now here I don't have Noelle built completely yet because I did just start building her a week ago, so I don't have her maxed out yet, but she is very effective as an on-field character for Furina teams, as she can also do quite some damage. I mentioned her a few times in various teams, but I'll mention them again in a better way. So the last two slots can be honestly a lot of characters who just do damage from off-field. Basically a sub DPS, so Yolan or Xingqiu, or Fischl, Yaemiko, Kazuha, and other anime characters, or you could have Goruo, Zhongli, you can even run Triple Geo. There's a lot of options. You just need to have Noelle on field with characters that can help her from off field. I didn't mention all of them because there is a lot of them. There's a lot you can argue you can use, so just try them out if you have them. Basically, Noelle is just a really good strong unit to have on field, and if you don't want to use a main DPS and you just have a lot of sub DPSs, then Noelle can fit very well with those teams. Now, I just want to talk about Wriothesley again. I did mention most of his teams related to freeze, but there's also another way you can play Wriothesley with Furina, by running Furina, Wriothesley, and actually melting. So you could use someone like Jean and then a pyro in it, like Bennet or Zhangling, to do Wriothesley melt. Now for Neuvillette, there's a variety of teams that Noelle and Furina work with, like Hyperbloom or Electrocharge, Freeze even. So if you're going for Hyperbloom, you will have a Dendro and an Electro. Usually I'd recommend using Kuki or Raiden, as I said before, and the Dendro character, because it's Neuvillette, you don't always have to run another healer because he can heal the team if he's using Prototype Ember and himself. So he won't be like an amazing healer because he is just using Prototype Ember, but the team will have enough Furina stacks because his HP changes a lot. So you will be able to get enough Furina stacks with just Neuvillette and having no more healers. So in a team with Furina, then Neuvillette, Fischl, and Kazuha, or Genie instead of Kazuha if you really want the heals, or you could run Neuvillette, Fischl, Albedo, or just add Baizhu. Then if you're making freeze, you can add Kazuha with Charlotte or Diona or Rosaria. You could also go something like Zhongli and Kokomi. You have quite a few ways because you're basically just replacing one of the characters with Furina in the teams Neuvillette already had, and you don't have to worry about changing the whole team like for the other teams because of the HP changing thing. Where here, Neuvillette is able to hold on by himself. So if you really want a detailed guide, you can watch my other video on Neuvillette and just combine what you learned here and there and make yourself a really good team. Next, I want to talk about Wanderer. Now with Wanderer, you usually want to play Wanderer with Faruzan. So basically your team would initially look like this with Wanderer, Faruzan, and Furina, with your last slot having to be a healer. In which case, Mika works very well because people used to use Wanderer with Mika because Mika can buff your attack speed. So he can be used here with Wanderer and can provide heals. But as you can see, there are no shields, which can make it really difficult to use. Even in my last Wanderer team guide, I said how much I recommend using shields. So though you're getting high damage, you need to be very careful. And whoever has Wanderer already knows how irritating it is to play Wanderer without shields. You can also use other healers. It's just that Mika is very good with Wanderer. You can also use Jean or Charlotte or even Bennet. And as for Faruzan though, usually Faruzan is paired with Wanderer. You can add someone else as a flex here, like maybe Yelan or Sincho, or anyone else that can provide damage or be helpful to a Wanderer if you don't have C6 Faruzan, because unfortunately Faruzan just really wants her cons to be good with Wanderer. If you have C6 Faruzan, definitely put them both together. If you don't, you can potentially use other characters instead of Faruzan. Xiao can also work with Furina, so similar to Wanderer, Faruzan with Mika is a good team, but you can also use Bennet or Jean or Zhongli or a sub DPS or another good healer like Charlotte. So basically pretty much like Wanderer, whatever is it there. Now I want to talk about Child and Ayato. So you will have Child or Ayato, and then the last two slots being, again, you would have one of them being a healer and then the last one being a flex. So you could do Jean as the healer and then Fischl or Yelan Sincho as a flex. So if you remember the triple hider teams I talked about, you can basically make them here, but with Ayato as your on-field DPS. You can also use a different healer like Charlotte or Kokomi and have Kazuha instead as your animal flex. With Child, you can do something similar like I said for Ayato if you really wanted to use Furina and Child together. Finally, I have Eula to talk about. With Eula teams, you want to have at least one Electro character. The Electro character can be Raiden or Fischl, and then your last slot can be a healer, in which case Mika, who works with Eula really well, or Charlotte can work too. And that's all for this video. A very long video. I tried my best covering whatever I could, but of course I couldn't explain the teams in more detail like I usually do because of the sheer amount of teams there were, but nonetheless, I hope this helped. If you guys have any questions about specific teams, just ask me, I'll answer. And with that, that's all, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!